let's begin with the new fees for foreigners. What do you think about that? Is it going to affect your business?
I don't think it will affect my business that much. I think that a lot of our visitors that are coming internationally are spending, it's already going to be a high expense just to get here. I don't think it's going to turn people away. It may be that people are potentially less inclined, which some of them have been lately anyway, to do things like tours. They're saving it for food, for lodging, which it's an expensive destination these days. So I am hoping that it doesn't necessarily affect my business. We do have quite a few international travelers, but they tend to be the folks that are just going into it knowing that they're going to spend a chunk of change, and that's just part of the deal. And I think also, as I understand it, it's not uncommon globally for people to pay a higher fee if they're coming from out of country. So I'm hoping that it doesn't impact my business or our businesses here collectively. That said, I do think that the gate fees are pretty reasonable, and if we can garner more cash flow for the infrastructure where we really need it, then it's probably not a bad thing.
So you think it's overall raising the fees is a good idea?
Yeah, I think so. It's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because the parks, I want them to be accessible. And as they've gotten more expensive, not necessarily gate fees, but just lodging, tours, food, things like that. It makes it so that people can't just throw the kids in the back of the wagon and drive over the way they used to. And that's been a growing concern for me. It's one of the issues with any kind of timed entry, is that it creates a situation where you have to have capacity to be able to plan a year in advance. And we're pretty much there now with, the level of visitation and the limited lodging and cost of things, So in general, I don't think that charging international visitors is a bad thing. A little bit more, I hope that it doesn't have a great impact on tourism. I doubt that it will. Because Yellowstone's always going to be a prized destination. It's just such a coveted place to come and be. So I don't foresee it having a huge impact on my business. I'll be curious to see and hear from folks. I know some folks have already planned ahead and gotten their fees. Some folks have planned ahead and gotten their park pass before tomorrow.
Sure. So I've spoken to some people who told me, well, we don't think it'll hurt business, but we're not sure it's exactly the message the United States, which founded the idea of a national park, should be sending to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I think right now we are not in a very opening. I think right now, I think right now we're not in a very open and welcome space. I know I have a lot of international friends and clients that aren't particularly comfortable right now crossing the border. And I know there's a lot of international concern for how things are domestically right now. Um, I think that has more to do with the political climate and the social climate and the economic climate than it does with something like gate fees. I think it's sort of a symptom. That said, I would have maybe preferred a gentler rollout, like maybe within 5 years, we're going to have these fees instead of a couple of months to prepare for such a dramatic increase. That might have felt a little bit friendlier to our international travelers and friends. Um, I know there are a number of friends that I have that come internationally that are on a shoestring budget, and that would impact them deeply. Um, Not necessarily my clients, but fellow travelers and people that are just exploring with their backpack on and taking advantage of public transportation and things like that. Yellowstone is a difficult place to get to any time of the year. It's sort of at the end of the road in a lot of ways. It's not necessarily on the way to someplace the way some other parks are. We don't have a large urban center nearby, thankfully. So it's a process and it's a commitment just to get here. So it'll be interesting to see. um, how the international community of travelers responds to it. What I've been hearing so far is that it's not terribly unexpected and that it shouldn't have a gross impact on overall operations or visitation.
And what about for U.S. residents, the standard park fee, which has been fairly low for many years? Should we be looking at maybe bumping that up a little too?
Interesting about talking about upping our domestic fee, Americans. It's a great deal, but I really strongly feel that our parks are a symbol of democracy and it should belong to all of us. I literally welcome people home when they come. Welcome home. You own this. You're paying for it. When we see rangers or maintenance, you're paying for that, and that means you get a say in it. So I really want to have that sense of coming home for people. It's a great deal. And I do think what I would prefer to see is a more fair tax structure. Our taxes helping to support the infrastructure of Yellowstone and our national parks in general, our public lands across the board. I don't think $80 for an annual fee is an unfair amount. And there's, the senior passes and the vet passes and the fourth graders. And, there's a lot of different ways to take advantage of some of those opportunities. So I don't necessarily think that I think it's a great deal, especially for a family on vacation. I would like to see as much accessibility as possible. And I know that that's hard and growing harder for a lot of Americans. And that's a concern. I want it to be accessible for everyone.